The weapons crafting hall smelled like ozone and burnt quartz, which Valencia had learned was completely normal and not a sign of imminent disaster. The overhead lights shifted from pale blue to soft amber as Instructor Vexorine moved between the long, crystalline tables, his two-faceted amber eyes catching the glow and throwing tiny rainbows across the ceiling. Valencia sat at her station near the back, bouncing slightly on her stool. She'd been struggling in xenobiology. She'd nearly failed interstellar navigation. But this, making something with her hands, this she could do. Today's assignment is simple, Instructor Vexorine announced, his voice resonating from the harmonic cavity in his chest rather than any visible mouth. His pale violet crystalline body pulsed with calm internal light as he held up a small ceremonial blade. You will craft a traditional Velthori bonding knife. The blade must be no longer than your forearm. The edge must be sharp enough to score glass but dull, enough to require pressure. The handle must bear a personal marking. His two arms gestured toward the doorway leading to the materials vault. You will select your materials from the approved bins. Soft ceremonial metals only. Nothing above Tier 3 hardness. This is about technique, not strength. Valencia was already halfway out of her seat. Thrin, her lab partner, rose more slowly beside her. The smaller Velthori student had a pale blue crystalline coloring that Valencia thought was absolutely beautiful, like frozen morning sky. Her two amber eyes blinked in sequence rather than together, which had startled Valencia during their first week, but now just seemed normal. You seem excited, Thrin observed, her crystalline hair chiming softly as she tilted her head. I'm really good at this kind of thing, Valencia said, and she meant it with her whole chest. My grandmother taught me how to sharpen knives when I was little. Kitchen knives, hunting knives, all of it, she said. The secret was patience and listening to the metal. Thrin's body flickered briefly, a ripple of confusion passing through her translucent form. Listening to metal? You know, feeling when it wants to cooperate. Metal does not want things. Valencia grinned. That's what makes it a secret. The materials vault was enormous, towering shelves stretching up toward dim blue lighting that made everything look vaguely underwater. Raw metals and crystals filled labeled bins along every wall, organized by hardness tier, molecular structure, and something called harmonic resonance compatibility that Valencia had nodded along to during orientation without understanding a single word. Other students filtered in around them, selecting their materials with careful consideration. A tall Velthori with deep green coloring chose a soft silver ingot. Another picked up a chunk of something that looked like frozen honey. Valencia wandered deeper into the vault. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She was looking for something that felt right. Grandmother had always said the material chose you as much as you chose it, and Valencia had carried that wisdom across 3 star systems to this alien academy where nobody else seemed to understand what she meant. Thrin followed her nervously, her chiming growing slightly higher in pitch. The approved bins are back that way. I know, I just want to look around first. The approved bins are specifically approved. I'm just looking. Valencia turned down a narrow aisle between shelves marked with symbols she couldn't read. The lighting here was dimmer, the blue glow barely reaching the lower bins. Dust covered some of the containers, suggesting they hadn't been accessed in quite some time. And there, in a bin with a faded label that might have once said something important, she saw it. A shard of something dark. Not quite black, but close. It seemed to drink the blue light rather than reflect it, with occasional flickers of deep purple running through its surface like trapped lightning. It was roughly the size of her palm, irregular in shape, and when Valencia reached down to touch it, she felt a hum run up her arm and settle somewhere behind her sternum. Oh, she breathed. Hello. The shard was cold, heavier than it looked, and absolutely perfect. What is that? Thrin asked, leaning over Valencia's shoulder. Her pale blue body flickered again, but she didn't seem alarmed. Curious, maybe. I don't know. It wasn't labeled. Perhaps you should ask Instructor Vexorine before. It's fine. Valencia lifted the shard carefully, cradling it in both hands. It was in the vault, right? Everything in the vault is approved. Thrin's crystalline hair stood slightly more rigid than usual, but she didn't argue. I suppose that is logical. Valencia beamed at her. See? It's fine. This is going to be great. Back in the weapons crafting hall, Valencia set up her station with careful attention. She'd watched the orientation videos. She'd studied the tool guides. She knew exactly what she was supposed to do, and she was going to do it perfectly. The shard sat on her workstation, still humming faintly against the crystalline surface. The other students had already begun working on their soft ceremonial metals, shaping and polishing with practiced ease. Instructor Vexorine moved between the tables, offering guidance, his violet body pulsing with patient warmth. Valencia picked up a shaping file and got to work. The shard did not cooperate. The file skidded across the surface without leaving a mark. Valencia frowned, adjusted her angle, tried again. Nothing. The file might as well have been made of paper for all the impact it had. Okay, different approach. She selected a harder file from the tool rack, then a carbide scraper, then something called a molecular abrasion pad that she was fairly sure was meant for finishing work rather than initial shaping, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Nothing worked. The shard sat there, dark and beautiful and completely uncooperative, humming its little hum while Valencia's arms started to ache. Thrin glanced over from her own workstation, where her soft silver blade was already taking elegant shape. Do you need assistance? No, I've got it. Valencia wiped sweat from her forehead. It's just stubborn. Grandmother always said the stubborn ones make the best blades. That seems counterintuitive. That's what makes it a secret. Valencia stared at the shard. The shard presumably stared back. She thought about what grandmother had always said about difficult materials. You couldn't force them. You had to convince them. You had to find the grain, the hidden structure, the path of least resistance that the material itself wanted to follow. She closed her eyes, placed both hands flat on the shard's cold surface, and listened. For a long moment there was nothing, just the ambient chiming of Velthori students at work, the hum of the overhead lights, the distant thrum of the Academy's power core somewhere far below. Then faintly she felt it, a direction, a willingness. The shard had a grain after all, just running so deep and so fine that normal tools couldn't find it. Valencia opened her eyes, selected the smallest, sharpest precision tool she could find, positioned it at exactly the angle the shard seemed to want, and pressed down with steady, patient pressure. A tiny curl of dark material peeled away from the surface. Yes, Valencia whispered. There you go. Good job. The work was slow, incredibly slow. The other students finished their blades and moved on to polishing while Valencia was still coaxing the basic shape out of her stubborn shard. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers cramped. She forgot to eat the nutrition pack she'd brought for lunch. But the shape was emerging, and it was beautiful. Instructor Vexorine made his rounds, several times pausing at Valencia's station with what she interpreted as approval. His two amber eyes examined her progress, and his violet body maintained its calm, pulsing glow. Determination is admirable, he said, his harmonic voice warm. That appears to be a challenging ore you've selected. It's worth it, Valencia said without looking up. It's going to be really good. I look forward to seeing the result. He moved on to the next station, and Valencia felt a surge of pride warm her chest. She was going to impress him. She was going to prove that humans could do more than nearly fail xenobiology and get lost on the way to the dining hall. She was going to make the best bonding knife this academy had ever seen. By late afternoon, the blade was taking final shape. Valencia had managed to coax an edge onto the material, working with agonizing care along that hidden grain, convincing each millimeter to sharpen rather than forcing it. The process felt less like crafting and more like negotiation, and somewhere along the way, she'd started talking to the blade. Just a little more here. That's it. You're doing great. We're almost done. Thrin had finished her own blade hours ago, but remained at her station, watching Valencia work with an expression that might have been fascination or concern. Her pale blue body flickered occasionally, and her crystalline hair chimed at irregular intervals. It's almost done, Valencia announced, sitting back to examine her work. I just need to polish it and add the personal marking. The blade was gorgeous, dark as deep space, with those occasional purple flickers dancing through the metal like captured stars. The edge was so fine it was almost invisible, a razor-thin line that seemed to cut the light itself. The handle fit perfectly in her hand, balanced exactly right, as if the material had shaped itself to her grip rather than the other way around. "That is unusual," Thrin said carefully. "I have never seen that material before. It was in the vault. I'm sure it's fine." Instructor Vexorine approached for his final inspection round, his footsteps making soft crystalline chimes against the floor. His two amber eyes swept across Valencia's completed blade, and for a moment his face, such as it was, all geometric planes and angles, showed nothing but professional assessment. Then his body color shifted. It happened slowly at first. The calm violet lightened to lavender, then to pink, then to a pale, almost white shade that Valencia had never seen him display before. "Student Valencia." His harmonic voice had lost its warmth, replaced by something tight and controlled. "Where did you acquire that material?" "The vault. There was a bin near the back, kind of dusty." "Which bin?" "Precisely." Valencia described the location, the faded label, the dim lighting. With each detail, Instructor Vexorine's body shifted further toward white, and his crystalline hair began to stand rigid, along his geometric spine ridge. "That section of the vault," he said, each word carefully modulated, "was scheduled for removal 3 months ago. The bins there contain materials that were incorrectly filed and awaiting transfer to maximum security storage." Valencia blinked. "Oh, so not approved materials?" "That depends on how you define approved." His two amber eyes fixed on the blade in her hands. "What you are holding appears to be refined Tier-9 Military-Grade Starship Armor. It is used in the construction of Dreadnought-class warships. It is not," his voice cracked slightly, harmonics wobbling, "meant for student projects." The other students in the hall had gone very quiet. Valencia noticed several of them backing toward the walls. Thrin's pale blue body had shifted to almost white, and her chiming had become a high, continuous whine. "I didn't know," Valencia said, genuine distress flooding through her. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make something nice. I can put it back?" "You cannot put it back. You have shaped it. You have given it an edge." Instructor Vexorine's body was now cycling through colors rapidly, white to pink to orange to white again. Tier-9 armor is not meant to be edged. The molecular structure resists all known shaping techniques. What you have done should not be possible. Valencia looked down at the blade. It hummed contentedly against her palm. "I just listened to it, like my grandmother taught me." Instructor Vexorine made a sound that was definitely not part of normal Velthori communication. His internal light was pulsing erratically now, fast and uneven. "Perhaps," he said, with tremendous effort at calm, "you could demonstrate the edge on the testing block so that I may assess the situation." He gestured toward the demonstration station at the front of the hall, where a block of compressed stellar granite sat on a reinforced pedestal. The block had been there for as long as anyone could. Remember, used for centuries to test student blades. It was legendary for being completely, utterly, demonstrably unbreakable. Valencia approached the block with her blade, happy to show off her work despite the mounting tension in the room. She'd done a good job. The edge was perfect. Surely Instructor Vexorine would see that and understand she hadn't meant any harm. "I'll just do a light test," she said reassuringly. "Nothing aggressive." She pressed the blade gently against the surface of the stellar granite. The blade passed through the block like it wasn't there. The two halves of the demonstration block, each one weighing approximately 300 pounds and supposedly capable of withstanding direct plasma bombardment, fell away from each other and hit the floor with twin crashes that shook the entire hall. Valencia stared at the blade, then at the split block, then at the blade again. "Oh," she said softly, that's really sharp." Every Velthori in the room had gone completely white. Thrin's crystalline project slipped from her nerveless fingers and shattered against the floor. Nobody noticed. Instructor Vexorine's harmonics had stopped entirely. His two amber eyes were fixed on the blade in Valencia's hands, with an expression that, despite his alien features, was unmistakably pure, crystalline terror. Valencia looked up at him with genuine concern. I can fix the block, she offered helpfully. Do you have any adhesive? Or maybe I could make another block? I'm really sorry about— Do not move, Instructor Vexorine said, his voice barely above a whisper. Do not speak. Do not adjust your grip on that weapon. It's not a weapon, it's a bonding knife. It is no longer a bonding knife. His body was pulsing white so intensely that he was actually illuminating the students nearest to him. I need to contact Administrator Koroth. Immediately. Please remain exactly where you are and do not cut anything else. Valencia stood very still, holding her beautiful, terrible blade, while Instructor Vexorine backed away slowly and began making urgent harmonic signals toward the administrative wing. Thrin edged closer, her white body flickering with something that might have been awe. That was the demonstration block, she said quietly. It has been here for 400 years. I really didn't mean to break it. I believe you. Thrin's two amber eyes studied the blade with nervous fascination. How does it feel? The blade? Valencia considered the question. The dark metal hummed against her palm, warm now instead of cold, as if it had finally accepted her completely. It feels happy, she said, like it was waiting to be made, and now it's glad someone finally did it right. Thrin's crystalline hair chimed in a complex pattern that Valencia had learned to recognize as Velthori laughter, though there was a distinctly hysterical edge to it. You are a very unusual human, Thrin said. Valencia smiled, genuine and warm. Thank you. I really was just trying to do a good job. Somewhere in the distance, a deep harmonic alarm began to sound. The overhead lights shifted from amber to red, and through the main doors of the weapons crafting hall, the massive crystalline form of Administrator Koroth appeared, his two amber eyes blazing and his deep purple body already shifting toward much paler shades. Valencia waved at him with her free hand. Hi, she called out cheerfully. I'm really sorry about the block. I'm also apparently sorry about my choice of materials. But I want you to know that I had the best intentions and I'm totally willing to fix whatever needs fixing. Administrator Koroth stopped in his tracks. His two amber eyes moved slowly from Valencia to the split demonstration block to the blade in her hands. His body went completely white. Administrator Koroth was the largest Velthori Valencia had ever seen. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his deep purple crystalline body now shifting rapidly toward white as he processed the scene before him. The geometric ridge along his spine seemed sharper than Instructor Vexorine's, more pronounced, and his crystalline hair hung in thick, chiming strands that were currently standing completely rigid. His two amber-faceted eyes moved slowly across the room, the split demonstration block, the white-bodied students pressed against the walls, Instructor Vexorine still pulsing erratically, and Valencia standing in the middle of it all with a smile and a blade that shouldn't exist. Explain, he said. His harmonic voice was deeper than Vexorine's, resonating through the floor and up through Valencia's feet. Instructor Vexorine's explanation came out in rushed, wobbling harmonics. The misfiled materials, the unauthorized selection, the impossible shaping, the demonstration that had destroyed 400 years of Academy history in approximately half a second. Throughout the explanation, Valencia stood very still and tried to look apologetic. The blade hummed contentedly in her hand. Administrator Koroth listened without interruption. His body cycled through white, pale blue, back to white, then settled into a flickering pattern that Valencia couldn't interpret. When Vexorine finished, the administrator was silent for a long moment. You shaped Tier-9 armor, he said finally, addressing Valencia directly, with Academy tools. Yes, sir. Well, mostly the small precision ones. The big ones didn't work very well. Tier-9 armor does not shape. It resists molecular restructuring. Our military spends decades developing specialized equipment that can barely scratch its surface. Valencia nodded earnestly. It was pretty stubborn at first, but my grandmother always said the stubborn materials make the best blades, so I just had to find the right approach. The right approach. Listening to the metal, finding the grain, being patient. Valencia held up the blade, and several students flinched backward. See how the edge follows the natural structure? That's the key. You can't force it. You have to convince it. Administrator Koroth's white coloring somehow became whiter. Valencia hadn't known that was possible. "I would like to see a demonstration," he said. Instructor Vexorine's harmonics spiked in alarm. "Administrator, with respect, the testing chamber would be more appropriate." "The testing chamber? Yes." Koroth's two amber eyes hadn't left the blade. "Student Valencia, you will accompany us. Touch nothing on the way there." "Of course." Valencia fell into step behind the two Velthori, still holding her blade carefully. Thrin hurried to join her, pale blue body flickering with nervous energy. "I think you might be in trouble," Thrin whispered, her crystalline hair chiming softly. "I know, but he said he wanted a demonstration, so maybe he's impressed?" "His body is white. That indicates extreme distress." "Oh," Valencia considered. "This. Maybe he's impressed and distressed. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Thrin made that complex chiming sound again, the hysterical laughter that Valencia was becoming very familiar with. The testing chamber was located 3 levels down, behind a series of reinforced doors that required Administrator Koroth's personal harmonic signature to open. The room was larger than the weapons crafting hall, with walls that supposedly could withstand direct bombardment from capital ships. Target dummies of various materials lined one wall. An observation window separated a small control booth from the main chamber. Scorch marks decorated several surfaces, evidence of previous tests that had apparently gotten exciting. "Standard protocol," Koroth announced, his harmonics carefully controlled. "Demonstrate the blade's cutting capability on the training dummies. Begin with the lowest density and progress upward." Valencia approached the first dummy. It appeared to be made of something like compressed foam, probably meant for the softest ceremonial blades. She gave it a gentle swipe. The dummy fell into 2 pieces before she felt any resistance at all. "Next," Koroth said. The second dummy was denser, some kind of synthetic material that reminded Valencia of rubber. The blade went through it like water through air. "Next." The third dummy was metal. Thin metal, but still metal. The blade didn't even slow down. "Next." The fourth dummy was thick metal, the kind of metal that probably required power tools to cut under normal circumstances. The blade passed through it so smoothly that Valencia actually overbalanced slightly, having expected some resistance. "Next." The fifth dummy was stone, actual stone, dark and heavy and solid. The blade sliced through it with a soft hissing sound, and the 2 halves toppled in opposite directions. Administrator Koroth had stopped saying next. His body was pulsing white so intensely that he was actually casting shadows. In the opposite direction, his internal light overwhelming the chamber's standard illumination. "There's one more," Valencia offered helpfully, pointing to the final dummy at the end of the row. This one was massive, made of something that looked like compressed crystal, probably the same material as the Velthori themselves. "That dummy is made of synthetic Velthori crystal compound," Instructor Vexorine said, his voice strained. "It is used to test weapons for potential lethality against our species." "Oh, should I not?" "Please proceed," Koroth said. His harmonics had gone completely flat. Valencia approached the final dummy carefully. She didn't want to hurt anyone, even a fake crystalline person. But the administrator had asked, and she wanted to be cooperative. She pressed the blade against the dummy's arm, applying minimal pressure. The arm separated from the body and shattered on the floor. Valencia jumped backward, genuine distress flooding through her. "I'm so sorry, I barely touched it. Is that what would happen to a real Velthori?" The silence in the testing chamber was absolute. Then Administrator Koroth turned and walked toward the reinforced wall. His 2 crystalline arms reached out, and he placed both palms flat against the surface that could supposedly withstand capital ship bombardment. "Test the wall," he said quietly. "Sir?" "Test the wall." Valencia approached the wall uncertainly. This didn't feel like a good idea. But Koroth was the administrator, and she was already in significant trouble, and maybe demonstrating full cooperation would help her case. She touched the blade to the wall, applying the same minimal pressure. The blade sank into the reinforced material like a knife through warm butter. Valencia pulled it back quickly, leaving a perfect cut about 6 inches deep in the wall that was supposed to be indestructible. The wall is rated for sustained plasma bombardment, Instructor Vexorine said, his voice barely a whisper. It has never been breached in the Academy's history. I'm really sorry, Valencia said miserably. I can stop. I won't cut anything else. I promise. Administrator Koroth turned away from the wall. His body had stopped cycling through colors and settled into a steady, pulsing white that made him look like a very large, very stressed ghost. Student Valencia, he said carefully, do you understand what you have created? A really sharp knife? You have created a blade that can cut through any known material in the galaxy. Starship armor, fortified walls, Velthori crystal. There is nothing we have tested that can resist its edge. His two amber eyes fixed on her with terrible intensity. This weapon could slice through a dreadnought's hull. It could carve through planetary defense systems. It could, he paused, harmonics wavering. It could end civilizations. Valencia looked down at the blade. It hummed happily against her palm, completely, unaware of its own catastrophic potential. I just wanted to make a nice bonding knife, she said quietly. Koroth's expression, such as it was, all geometric planes and faceted eyes, softened slightly. His white coloring flickered toward pale violet for just a moment. I believe you, he said. That is somehow worse. The next hour was a blur of increasingly panicked discussions. Instructor Vexorine suggested destroying the blade, but when they attempted to test this theory on a small sample of the original material, nothing they tried even scratched it. Koroth proposed confiscating the weapon and storing it in maximum security, but the blade was so dangerous that transporting it would require protocols that didn't exist yet. Valencia sat in a corner of the testing chamber, holding her creation and feeling terrible about everything. Thrin sat beside her, pale blue body occasionally flickering with sympathetic distress. They could just let me keep it, Valencia suggested, during a pause in the adult discussions. I promise I wouldn't cut anything important. I could just use it for cooking maybe. Chopping vegetables? Every Velthori in the room turned to stare at her. You want to use the most dangerous blade in galactic history, Koroth said slowly, for food preparation. Well, it would be really efficient. Nothing would be too tough to cut, and I already made a sheath for it, so it would be safe when I'm not using it. You made a sheath? Valencia brightened, pulling the sheath from her workstation bag. She'd crafted it from leftover material, shaping it with the same patient technique. It was beautiful, dark as the blade itself, with matching purple flickers running through the surface. See? Perfectly safe storage. The blade slides in and out smoothly, and the material is just as strong as the blade, so nothing can accidentally cut through. She stopped talking because Administrator Koroth had made a sound that was definitely not part of normal Velthori communication. His white body was pulsing erratically, and his crystalline hair was chiming in discordant patterns. You made an indestructible sheath, he said. Well, yes. It would be silly to have a sheath that the blade could cut through, using the same Tier-9 armor material. There was plenty left over. I didn't want to waste it. Koroth sat down heavily on a nearby bench. The bench creaked under his crystalline weight but held. For a long moment, he simply stared at Valencia with his two amber eyes, his body flickering through too many colors to track. The sheath, he said finally. May I examine it? Valencia handed it over carefully. Koroth turned it in his crystalline hands, studying the craftsmanship with the same intensity he'd shown the blade itself. This should not be possible, he said quietly. The blade was remarkable enough. But you shaped the material twice. Two separate pieces, both perfectly formed, both demonstrating technique that our best weapons masters could not replicate. I just listened to it, Valencia said again. It wanted to be shaped. It was tired of sitting in that dusty bin. It wanted to be useful. It wanted. Metals have feelings. My grandmother taught me that. Koroth looked at Instructor Vexorine. Vexorine looked back at Koroth. Some complex harmonic exchange passed between them that Valencia couldn't interpret. Student Valencia, Koroth said slowly, I am going to offer you several things. Please allow me to finish speaking before you respond. Valencia nodded. First, you will receive full marks for this assignment. The highest marks in Academy history, in fact, Because you have accomplished something that should be impossible. His white coloring flickered toward pale violet. Second, you will receive a full scholarship covering the remainder of your education, because frankly, we would prefer to keep you where we can observe you. Valencia's eyes widened. Third, you will be granted an official weapons crafting license, class unlimited, because there is clearly no material you cannot shape, and we would rather have you working within a legal framework. Koroth's body shifted toward deeper purple. Fourth, and most importantly, you will be formally requested, not ordered requested, to never make anything again without direct administrative oversight. But please let me finish. Koroth held up one crystalline hand. The blade and sheath will be registered as cultural artifacts, Class 1, with you designated as the sole authorized handler. They will remain in your possession because, quite honestly, we cannot take them from you safely. Valencia sat very still, processing this information. So, I'm not in trouble? You are in the opposite of trouble. You are so far from trouble that trouble cannot see you from where you are standing. Koroth's harmonics carried a note of exhausted resignation. You are, however, going to give my administrative staff considerable anxiety for the remainder of your academic career. Valencia felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd come to this academy expecting to struggle, to barely scrape by, to prove that humans didn't really belong among the stars. Instead, she'd made something beautiful and terrible and been rewarded for it. Thank you, she said softly. I promise I'll be careful. I won't cut anything important. I'll ask permission before starting any projects. See that you do. Koroth rose from the bench, his deep purple coloring finally stabilizing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to file approximately 47 incident reports and update the materials vault security protocols. He strode toward the exit, then paused at the door. Student Valencia? Yes, sir. Your grandmother. What species was she? Valencia blinked. Human. She was just a regular human woman. She had a small kitchen and a lot of old knives, and she taught me everything about metalwork before she passed away. Koroth's two amber eyes studied her for a long moment. His body flickered through several colors before settling back to deep purple. Humans, he said quietly, are a deeply concerning species. Then he was gone, his crystalline footsteps chiming down the corridor. Thrin helped Valencia gather her things, her pale blue body finally returning to its normal calm glow. That was the most exciting day of my entire academic career, she said. I'm really sorry about all the chaos. Don't be. It was wonderful. Thrin's crystalline hair chimed with genuine warmth. Will you teach me the listening technique? I would like to understand how you do what you do. Valencia smiled, tucking her blade safely into its indestructible sheath. Of course. Grandmother always said knowledge should be shared. They walked together through the testing chamber doors, past the reinforced walls with their new scars, past the destroyed dummies and the panicked instructors. Valencia was already thinking about her next project. Maybe something smaller, something less catastrophic. A nice set of cooking knives, perhaps. She wondered if the academy had any more of that Tier-9 armor lying around. Probably best not to ask, but she was definitely going to check.